So good morning, everybody. We are continuing the journey of our Torah studies and our life studies, life coach studies. And this week's Torah portion is in the book of Exodus, the book of Shemot, and it's called Bo, which means to come. So let's do a little rehash, a review. So as we've discussed last week, Moshe and Aaron, Moses and Aaron, his older brother, are coming every few weeks to Paro to let my people go. Plague after plague. Paro says yes, then he reneges. Sounds familiar. He says yes, we're going to release the hostages. Then they change their mind. Yeah. And the history repeats itself. So there was a old fellow, a senior, who lived near a public school. And every day, the boys, good morning, Meredith, welcome back, we miss you.
Thank you.
And every day, the public school students would pass by his house, and he had metal garbage cans. Remember the metal garbage cans with the metal covers? Yeah. And they would drum and drum and drum and bang and drum. It would go on for hours. His garbage cans were their entertainment, and he went crazy. So he came up with a plan. He called the boys over. He said, guys, I love your drumming. I just love it. I love drumming so much. I'm going to pay you $1 per hour. Every day I want you to drum for an hour, and I'm going to pay you. And this went on for a few days. They drummed. He paid them $1. He comes over to them. He says, you know, guys, I'm a senior. I'm on Social Security. Can't pay you $1. I'll pay you 50 cents. They go, okay. You have to drum for an hour, 50 cents per drummer. They drum and drum. A few days go by. He calls them over. He goes, fellows, my Social Security payments were cut in half. I now can only pay you each 25 cents to drum. But I love your drumming. They go, chutzpah, you think we're going to drum for 25 cents? The audacity. Don't count on us anymore. And they left. And he never had noise again.
That's cute.
So we're coming to Paro. Every time Moshe comes to him and he says, let my people go. And every time he says, sure, just stop this plague. And of course, he reneges on his promise every single time. So we've gone through all the plagues, and now we're at the rehashing, reviewing. We're now at the plague of the locusts. And then this Torah portion is going to have the terrible plague of darkness. And then the end, the plague of the death of the firstborn of the Egyptians, and where the Jews finally leave. And Paro drives them out, says, go, leave. And then, of course, later on, we'll hear how he chases after them. So let's start off at the very beginning. A very cryptic sentence grammatically. Anybody know the first sentence of Bo? Bo el Paro. Come to Paro. God says, come to Paro. But not only come to Paro, he says, sorry, I'm going to grab this here. This is my page. I want to read you the actual pasuk. Hold on a second. It's nice to hear it inside. Boy el Paro, go on to Paro, ki ani hichbadati esli bai, for I have hardened his heart. It's first of all very strange. God is saying, come to Paro, because I have hardened his heart. First of all, what would you say to somebody? You're sending them on a mission.
Go.
Go. Very good. Lech el Paro. Go to Paro. Go to him. Go to him and tell him, come on, let my people go, or otherwise the next plague is coming your way. No, he says, come to Paro. Now, if he's also, forget about the grammatical problem here. If he's saying, come to Paro, because I've hardened his heart, why would Moshe want to go? It's like, say, going there, even though they're going to attack you with grenades. Why would God say, come to Paro? Forget about the language, because I've hardened his heart. That makes Moshe even more frightened to go.
Because maybe the come means come because I'm here, I'm God.
Very good.
The presence of God, this is where you should be.
Very, very good. So Meredith is exactly what the commentaries say. God is saying, come with me to Paro. I'm going with you. Don't be afraid, even though I've hardened his heart. So now we have two discussions, which we'll divide into two parts. First of all, free will. If God hardens the heart of Paro, of course he's not going to let the Jewish people go. So he really doesn't have a choice in the matter. God hardened his heart. And as a matter of fact, if you count, I counted 20 times. It doesn't say God hardened, he hardened his own heart. It says the heart of Paro was hardened by himself. Here it says, I have hardened his heart. I hardened his heart.
Can I ask you something? That's yeah. I don't mean to be late and be away and then jump in, but I think, but I thought about that last week also in Shul, which is right. That's like the existential problem. If even Paro would have free will. So here, I have hardened his heart, takes away his free will. But in the other examples, you could read it that his heart was hardened. He made the choice to harden his own heart. So if there's a distinction, but if there's a distinction, why would God say here, I have hardened his heart, taking away his free will? He didn't say that in the others. Is this the only one of those 20 times where he says he's deliberately done it? And if so, why? Because I thought we always have free will.
Good, very good. So I'll start with that question first, instead of saying what really happened here, which is called the death of conscience, I call it. Here is the point where that's why the plague of darkness and the firstborn come now. Because here is the final moment where Paro is absolutely worthless after the plague of the locusts. He's a goner, as we would say. So let's discuss the hardening of the heart. So the other times, Paro hardened his heart. Now, how do we know? How do we know? Because God knows what's going on by people. If I wrote the Torah, I wouldn't know what Paro hardened his heart. Only God can see. Oh yeah, he was very stubborn. So all the other times, Paro himself initiated that attitude. I'm not letting you go. Why should I let you go? I have free slaves here. I mean, also, we can go into the analysis of why a Hitler, a Paro, a Stalin, a Hamas, Hezbollah feel that they can enslave people. That's a different discussion. But he hardened his own heart. He was a Rasha Marusha, evil person. Now God tells Moshe twice in this Torah portion, I am hardening his heart. Vechazek leiv Paro. I have hardened the heart of Paro. So let's build on it. So the simple explanation from the commentaries is one, because if God would have not hardened his heart, what would you say? Good morning, Laura. God, you would say, of course he let the Jewish people go. Wouldn't you let the people go if you had a gun to your head and I said to you, either let them go or I'll shoot you? It's like you're held up by a thief, says, give me your wallet or I'll kill you. You're not going to give your wallet? So if God would not have hardened his heart at this time, he might have actually let the people go. Because, why? The plagues got too much for him. So what would everyone say? He let the people go. God forced him. How could you withstand such horrible plagues? Now we're going to build on this. This is a simple commentary. Nice answer. Now let's go to the next part. God even explains why he hardened his heart. He says, so I could show him the full power of my plagues. God did not want him to escape the full realm of justice. You survived the locust, you survived the blood in the water, you survived the frogs, you survived the lice. But I didn't give you the full punishment yet. So God made sure that he should see the full power of Almighty God. And I don't know if we have time to go into it, but if you look at the 10 plagues based on Kabbalah, every plague, or even not on Kabbalah, regular commentaries, was there to teach the Egyptians, the world, and the Jewish people a different aspect of God's energy and power. I've mentioned this before. Why 10 plagues that each one lasted? Some say a month, some say 2 weeks, some say, commentaries say a week. Why the plagues? Why not go in with the big bang? Go in with the big bang and get them out of there. Like, in Entebbe, they didn't drop bombs. They went boom, in and out, grab the hostages. Because God did not only punish the Egyptians because they deserved the punishment. God was showing the Jewish people, after so many hundreds of years in slavery, that every part of the universe and the world is God's. Every part, the animal kingdom, human life, waters, natures. If you look at the plagues, it encompassed every part of the world. Like they say, you could take a slave out of slavery, but can you take the slave mentality, the slave out of could take the slavery out of the slave? It's not so easy. If you watched the Shawshank Redemption, Morgan Freeman, fantastic movie. He's released from prison after so many years, and he's in a checkout counter. He's working in the supermarket. He's a checkout bagger, and he has to use the lavatory. So he goes over to the supervisor. Can I use the lavatory? And the guy looks at him like he's crazy. Of course you could use the lavatory. You need permission? The slave mentality, the prisoner mentality. So the plagues were there to reorient, reprogram the Jewish people into you're free, because look who runs the world, not the Egyptians, God. And then another tidbit, if you look at the plagues, many of these objects, animals, water, were the object of their idolatry. They worshiped the Nile River. Remember, the Nile gave them their sustenance. They worshiped the sun. They worshiped sheep. They had so many gods. God was showing them and the Jewish nation, these are not gods. If they were gods, why didn't they fight back? There's only one God. So now we understand all this. So God was showing the world his power. This was meant to illustrate and transform the mindset of the Jewish people so they could become a people, and of course the Egyptians. So Meredith, what did you ask? I saw a question.
No, it's not important. I just was saying that we'll never know. I mean, God knew that even if they had not hardened his heart, he wasn't going to let them go. But based on what you're saying, if you look at it just like on its surface as a story, which I don't, and no one does probably on this call, if God had not here hardened his heart, it's possible that he would have finally let them go. I'm just being like stirring the pot.
Yeah. That's true. That's true.
Even though we know probably not. But I mean, that's just the one thing that all these many years I've read this story, thinking about what you've added for which I appreciate is the distinction in this one time. I don't know that I ever thought about it linguistically, but still it's possible, I guess, but it doesn't matter because it didn't happen. So you don't have to, so we can move on.
But I want to add the final analysis, which I always like. I love to dig hopefully to the bottom of the bin, deeper, based on Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah. That this is not Kabbalistic, this is more maybe psychological insight that the commentaries say, is that when you have a behavior pattern in your life, you become enslaved by that. He enslaved the Jewish people for so many years, he became a slave to that attitude. So, like I explained many times, what does mean the reward of the mitzvah is the mitzvah. The punishment of being a cruel dictator is not only that you have miserable, you destroyed, you enslaved thousands and thousands of Jews here and tortured them. and murdered the children, but you have become enslaved by your attitude of slavery. That's the punishment for Paro. Hardening his heart as a result of what he did. It's kind of like cause and effect. For example, an addict, in the beginning, it's just recreation. Then the addict can't get out of it. The addiction causes the demise of a person. You're so stingy. Person never gives, let's say, tzedakah. You can never take, Esther Jungers says, what's the problem? Why can't some people give a donation or tzedakah? Because they try, they put their hand in their pocket, but it gets stuck. They can't pull it out. So a person who never, I'm using a simple example, person who never wants to share even a little bit, the punishment isn't that the other person doesn't get the tzedakah, the punishment them, that they become enslaved to their stingy attitude, that's who they become. And they can't even get out of it. The addict, the punishment he cannot get or she cannot get out of her addiction. So what the commentary here that's going deeper says that the hardening of the heart was caused by Paro because he enslaved others. He now became a slave to the slavery in a sense. You know, like they say, when you have anger and resentment towards somebody and you carry it in your heart, who's punished? The person may not even know you're angry and resentful towards them. It's eating away at you. Every time you see them, every time you hear their name, you're angry, you're resentful. So it's hurting you more than it's hurting them even. You're a victim to your anger and resentment. So this is what the final analysis, which to me, I like this one the best, that the hardening of his heart was a result of his years and years of being a horrible, evil, brutal dictator who considered himself a deity, a god. And the final line I want to say, you see here, God doesn't hold back evil people from having free choice to do evil. How much more so, God doesn't hold back good from people from doing good. If God didn't stop a Hitler, a Stalin, a Paro, how much more so if we want to do good, we're not going to be held back from doing good. We have that free choice. So you have to look at it like in a more broad perspective here. People choose to be who they are. God is not going to hold you back from being horrific, and God won't hold you back from being hopefully good. So you choose your path. That's free choice. I know it's a much, much larger discussion, I have to say, but I hope I gave you a little bit of an insight into free choice here. So now let's go back. Does anybody want to add anything or say anything? So now to understand also the hardening of the heart, there's a conversation that happens here that hasn't happened before. This is another very interesting analysis. You notice in all the conversations with Moshe and Paro, it's very civil, right? It's very civil. Paro says to Moshe, you know, we've stopped the plague, let my people go. Otherwise, the next plague. And Paro says, stop the plague. Then he says, and it's always a civil conversation. They're never disrespect. Remember, they're kind of related. He's the step-grandson of Paro. He was like a prince of Egypt. So there's always respect till this final time. Listen what happens. Mechatanim, very good. This is what happens. Let me tell you what happens here now. This is after the plague of the locusts. No, after the plague of darkness. Moshe comes to Paro, says, let my people go. Look what Paro says. Go from me, beware, do not see my face anymore, for on the day you see my face, you shall die. This is the first time Paro says, I'm going to kill you, Moshe. Get out of my way, get out of my face, I'm going to kill you. What does Moshe do? Does anybody know? Does something so out of character. He slaps Paro, says the Talmud, across the face. And he says to him, truth have you spoken, I shall never see your face again.
The Talmud says he slaps him?
He slaps him in the face.
I've never, I mean, I'm not learned.
I know. And when I read this, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like, wow, I loved it. I love the scene. I could just see it. Moshe slapping.
I thought it was metaphorical. You meant it metaphorically, meaning he says, you're right. You will never see me again, because Moses knows that God means business for the last time, and Pharaoh's done, and they'll never see each other again.
Well, you could look it up in the Talmud.
No, I believe you. I believe you.
I'll tell you, Talmud Sanhedrin 58b is where I looked at it. I saw it. So the Talmud says, what's the thing of the slapping? Remember, Moshe's not how do you say someone who does things, they don't think before they do. What is it called?
Impulsive.
Impulsive. He's not impulsive. He didn't kill the Egyptian slave guard, the guard who's killing the Jew impulsively. He knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't slap Paro because, oh my gosh, I lost control of my emotions. Like, sometimes you break a plate because you're upset. He slapped Paro because he was telling him something very important. When you slap someone's face, like Rashi says in the story of the two Jews who were fighting, and Moshe says, how could you fight with another Jew? And Rashi says that when you hit a Jew, it's like killing. It's like you're a murderer. And you're killing God. When you slap a person, you're slapping God, because the face reflects, says the Kabbalah, the Talmud, sorry, this is from the Talmud, slaps the light of God. The face reflects God's image. The face is like the pinnacle of the person. You don't talk to someone's feet unless you can't make eye. If someone who can't make eye contact, they have a problem. And what was he saying? By wanting to kill Moshe, this was the final straw that broke the camel's back. Now there's the point of no return for Paro. The battle was over, and he lost his chance to recover. This was it. This was it. This was it. So everyone, I don't have time to do this because I want to go to something very spectacular in a minute, but I want to share one little tidbit here, that every one of the plagues dealt with another characteristic of the Jewish people. To liberate the Jewish people, I said every one of the plagues was there to show them how when you corrupt your intellect, when you corrupt your emotions on so many different levels, then you become a Paro. So blood, confidence, frogs, bonding, lice, submission, devouring beast was ambition, boils, rejection, hail, love, locust, intelligence, darkness, conception, and death of the firstborn is heightened awareness or superconscious. So every one of the plagues was there to attack a different level of emotional, intellectual of Paro and the Egyptians. Everything that had become corrupted in their lives. Their emotions were corrupt, their intellect were corrupt, their attitude was corrupt. This is a corrupt people. You don't become a killer. You don't become a Nazi by being a righteous person who's in touch with your feelings, who's in touch with your emotions, who's in touch with thinking. Life is sacred. People are important. I have a conscience. How could I just stab someone to death? It is a breakdown of every moral, ethical, emotional, intellectual makeup of the human being. This is now the Kabbalah explains. This one just says, oh yeah, we enslaved the Jews for a few hundred years. The corruption of every part of the human psyche is what enslaved the Jewish people. And God attacked every one of those emotions and intellectual capabilities to tear them down one by one. He pulled down every brick of them and gave them a chance to go to therapy and let the Jews go free. But when the people cannot let the slaves free, when Hitler can cremate and create a concentration camp, when Hamas can do what they do, it's a breakdown. The human being has no value anymore in this world. You cannot rehabilitate them anymore. capital punishment. That's what it is. You cannot rehabilitate. You can't have rachmanis on them anymore. They were given chance after chance. We gave them Gaza. We gave them money. We gave them everything. Can you rehabilitate a man who wakes up in the morning and his mission statement is to kill a Jew? You cannot. Now, bringing this back to Paro is exactly now, Moshe slaps him, and whether you call it a metaphor, you go with the Talmud, you still know now that this was the end of Paro, and the plague of the firstborn had to happen. You killed my children, my Jewish children are called the firstborn of God. I'm going to kill your firstborn. Tit for tat, capital punishment. You deserve the death penalty. This is basically what God is telling the Egyptians. You can't kill and get away with it. It doesn't work. Meredith, sorry, what did you ask? It popped up too quick. Let's look at chats. Want to repeat?
Oh, sorry. I just was saying that.
Yeah, go
sorry,
ahead. Don't be shy to speak. It's supposed to be.
No, I mean, like when we're davening on the Hagim, right, and the Day of Atonement, and my very limited understanding is that even in the final moment, right before death,
very good,
ask for forgiveness, and God will give you. Is that, given what you've just said, is the intention that is only for God's people? Because when I read that and I think about that's humanity, not just the Jew, but, given what you just said, based on what we daven for, that even in these final moments, we know this is a merciful God. If, how does that square with what you just said?
Because did Paro in any way repent? Do you see one word of him, any Egyptian saying, sorry? You see it anywhere?
No, but I guess my question is, if we were to, based on what you're saying, if there were one of these animals that we saw, surrounding a hamburger today, right? One of these literal animals.
Right.
If someone like that were to say, forgive me, God, would that person then be forgiven? Because that's what we're told, that God is always merciful, even in the final moments of death. He wants you to return.
So actually, I'll quote Schwarzenegger when the Desert Ocean Storm. They said, do you feel you have to give judgment on the enemy? And he said, no, that's not up to me. That's up to God. We just arranged the meeting. In other words, we kill them and they go up to the heavenly spheres, and then God does the judgment. It's not up to us. We have to meta. So in other words, if someone is a murderer and the rabbinical court, let's use the rabbinical court, gives them the death penalty because they murdered and it was proven, and we know without reasonable doubt, it's very, very strict. And the person repents, right, as he's being hung or stoned, or I don't remember exactly. And then they come up there. To remember, life doesn't end with the physical world here. There's an afterlife and there's resurrection. So then it's up to God. And by the way, there's many levels of repentance. A person asking forgiveness it says on Yom Kippur, you cannot repent to God for a sin you committed with another human being. So if you hurt, stole, or did something horrible, you have to call the person before Yom Kippur and make amends. So when a murderer like Hamas, at the final moment of his death, says, "I'm so sorry what I did to the Jew," and he's hung, now at that moment it's up to God. His soul has to deal with God. It's out of our realm. It's out of our realm. It's out of our realm. But the Torah is describing here what happened with Paro. That's why I call this the death of conscience. When Moshe sees there's no conscience left, he doesn't even have an iota of guilt or feeling. Maybe I did something wrong. Admit it. This is it. This is it.
Hey, sweetie.
Go ahead. Yeah, sorry. Somebody was asking something?
I said, hi, sweetie. My daughter just walked in.
Oh, okay. I want to add one more little tidbit before I go to the next part of the story, is that Bayal Paro, come to Paro, is also the story of our lives. We come into a situation, a Paro situation, a terrible challenge, a darkness, a pain. And God says, I have hardened the heart of Paro. I created this challenge in your life. Remember, everything in the world, whether we perceive it as bad or say, well, everything bad is for the good, whatever approach we have, God creates every situation. Everything happens because God lets it happen, wants it to happen. Now, when you come in your life and you meet a Paro in your life, either a Paro as a physical person or a Paro as a situation, you have to know it's a horrible situation. It's a terrible situation. It's a dark situation, but God has hardened the heart of Paro. This is telling us that God gave you the situation. The situation you find yourself in is because God put you there. So when it says, Boyel Paro, God is telling you, me, and all generations, you're going to come and you're going to encounter, everyone is going to encounter a Paro in their life. I don't know anybody who has not encountered a Paro in their life. How are you going to react to that Paro? Are you going to say, just happened? Or God hardened his heart? God created that Paro situation. For whatever reason, that's another discussion. Why do we have to have horrors in our life, tragedies in our life, executions, persecutions? That's a different story. But no, everything comes from God. God hardened Paro's heart. It didn't just happen. Everything comes from God. Everything comes from God. I mean, there's maneuverability. We know that. We discussed free choice. And if you trust in God, if you don't trust in God, God says, okay, you take the reins to the wagon. I'll lead the path, lead the way. There's a whole, mechanicals happening in the universe. But God is telling us, Boyel Paroi, you're going to come, you're going to meet a Paro in your life, but no, it comes from me. And how you react to that challenge will bring you growth, will bring you freedom, will free you from your enslavement, from your things in your life. No one wants a challenge, but speak to people who have gone through terrible, terrible circumstances, and they will tell you how they came out stronger, better, smarter. There isn't a person who, chas v'shalom, God forbid, and that's why we always say, God, give me revealed blessings. I don't want to have to find the good and the bad, so to speak. But people come out stronger, better from their horrific experiences. That's what happens, unfortunately, but that's what happens. And you see people in the concentration camp and stories from the horrors. I'm going to share a few stories a little bit later in the discussion. Or maybe they have to, maybe they have to make the choice to see it. Yes, yes, yes. And again, we never judge someone who's going through horrors or challenges. And we never say, well, look at it as a blessing. You're going to come out stronger. Again, remember, we discussed this many times. You don't be someone else's judge. If they're struggling, they have to say it. You can't say, oh, you should be stronger, you should be better. This is a challenge. God is testing you. That's not for you to say to someone else. Say it to yourself. Never, never. We have to always be empathetic and compassionate to someone else's challenges. Like the Rebbe said, I always quote this with Circle of Friends, that just like you can never escape your own life's challenges, you cannot look away from someone else's challenges. In other words, you can't ignore the pain they're going through. And it's not your role to tell them how they have to look at it from a higher vantage point. That's for you to say to yourself if you're on that level, Let people experience their pain the way they want to experience, the way they have to experience it, or the way they could experience it, and so on. So Boyel Paroi, we're always going to meet up with a Paro. Hopefully it's a small Paro. But we know God hardened his heart. God put the Paro there. That's the message. That's kind of like an insight. Does anybody want to say anything, add anything as we move on?
I'll just say one thing. This is my daughter, my 25-year-old daughter's bat mitzvah. She had a bat mitzvah. And
Mazel tov.
thank you. But this was, this was at 13. So she's 25, 12 years ago. And she's now living in Israel for a short time. And she spoke to her this morning. And I just have to make this one joke that in her bat mitzvah speech, when she said that when they tell the Israelites, you're going to remember, before they're leaving, they're talking about after we leave, we're going to remember this moment forever. She said, This is the justification for why every Jew in the world during breakfast is talking about, well, what are we having for dinner? Before. So I actually like to share that because I thought at 13, she got the sociocultural essence of the Jewish people from this portion. Anyway, it's silly and not serious, but I thought you might all enjoy hearing.
Yeah. The famous philosopher, I don't know if I pronounce it right. Help me. Thoreau, Thoreau. Remember him? Henry, yes. In the 1800s, he was a philosopher, he was a poet, he was an essayist. He said, not until we lost do we begin to understand ourselves, he said. It's in relation to the paro, that sometimes you will encounter a paro and you begin to understand yourself. And that's why they also say every flower grows through the dirt. This is kind of the concept that we were all going to encounter in our lives, like a certain paro, So the story of the donkey. They asked an old man, how did you become so smart? He says, good judgment comes from bad experience. He said. So the old man told the story that there was a fellow had a donkey and they were traveling and the donkey fell into a very deep pit. And the old man was like, how am I going to get my donkey out of the pit? And the donkey was braying and crying and braying. He didn't know what to do, the old man. He said, listen, I'm old, my donkey is old, I'm just going to bury him alive. So he began shoveling dirt into the hole. And as he's shoveling dirt and the hole is filling up, he noticed something miraculous. The donkey kept jumping on the piles. And as the piles of dirt grew, the donkey got higher and higher and got out of the pit. So to sum it up, sometimes, you're in a hole. But the very hole is sometimes also your escape. So it's an interesting insight. So, you look, the donkey fell in, it's all over. It's gone. We're going to bury the donkey alive. And lo and behold, up comes the donkey. So now we come to a very interesting part of the story. So they have the plague of darkness, and we have the plague of the firstborn. And Paro finally buckles and says, leave. And there's a lot to be said, but I want to focus on something that happens next. So God calls Moshe and says, the Jews got to get ready to leave. Take a goat, right? I'm going to read you the thing. And slaughter, shecht, the goat. And they shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and the lintel of the houses in which they are to eat it. So Moshe summons the elders with very specific details of the Korban Pesach. We call it this was the first Pesach Seder. Moshe summons the elders of Israel and he says to them, go pick out goats for your families and slaughter the Passover offering. Take a bunch of hyssop, dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and apply some of the blood that is in the basin on the lintel on the two doorposts. None of you shall go outside of your house until morning. For Hashem is going to smite the Egyptians. We'll see the blood in the lintel and the two doorposts, and Hashem will pass over the door and not let the destroyer enter and smite your home. Okay, very interesting part of the story, that before they can pack up their bags and their valuables, there has to be some sort of Passover Seder, Passover offering. Take a lamb, shechted properly, take the blood, because you know it's forbidden in Jewish law, even though this was beginning of the Torah, before the giving of the Torah, and smear the blood on the doorpost where you would normally put a mezuzah. And when you barbecue in a fire, it had to be done by fire, this delicious lamb. You can invite another family, you can invite extended family, but whoever came into the home to eat in your home couldn't leave till morning. You were stuck together for the night. So if Meredith invited her neighbor's cousins, her aunt, uncle from tent number 29 in Goshen in Egypt, you had to have them sleep over and spend till the next morning when everyone then was able to leave their houses. So you were stuck with your guests. You were stuck with your family, similar to a Pesach Seder. You don't like Uncle Moshe? Too bad. Too bad. You're stuck with Uncle Irving. You're stuck with Aunt Yenta. You're stuck with whoever you invited to your Pesach Seder in Mitzrayim. Okay. And there's a very, very fascinating insight I want to share about this whole story. The story is that when the Jews had to leave Egypt, Moshe knew very well that it's not so easy to just leave your trauma, your slavery behind. You have to go back in time to when the Jews came down to Egypt. Do you remember why they came down to Egypt? You remember how the whole Egyptian slavery thing began? Who knows? Who would like to share? Even if you don't know, share. You know, Jews, even when we don't know, we have opinions. So when did we come down to Egypt? Remember what happens?
We came down because after there was a famine, and that's why the brothers went to see Joseph. And then when he finally, after the back and forth, revealed himself, he told them that there was going to be this famine, that there would be more famine, and that they should come and bring everything and everyone. And that's when they came. Okay, so it all started with Joseph. It all started with Joseph. Remember, if Joseph wouldn't have become viceroy and plotted out how Egypt should be the country of abundance, no one would be coming to Egypt. They would all be starving. So in the book of Joshua, there's a very interesting insight. Joshua is the one who took the Jewish people into the land of Israel. He was the successor of Moses. So this is what God tells the Jewish nation, okay? Thus said the Lord God of Israel. He's giving them a little bit of a history story. Your fathers dwelt on the other side of the river from the earliest time. Terach, the father of Abram, and the father of Nachar, they served gods. God says, and I took your father Abram from the other side and led him to the land of Canaan and multiplied his seed and gave him Yitzchak. And God says, and then I gave Isaac, Jacob, and Esau, and I gave Esau Mount Seir to inherit it. And Jacob and his children went down to Egypt. And I sent Moses and Aaron, and I plagued the Egyptians. God is rehashing the story in the book of Joshua to the Jewish people. Do you notice something very interesting here? Did anybody catch on? When God tells the story of Abraham and how everything unfolded, he says, I brought Abraham to the land of Israel. I gave Abraham Isaac and Jacob. And I gave Esau Mount Seir to inherit it. And then God says, Jacob and his children went down to Egypt. God didn't say, and I sent them down to Egypt. In other words, Jacob and his children went down to Egypt on their own. God didn't send them down to Egypt. Why did they go down to Egypt? Because of what happened with Joseph. Had the brothers not come to their father and taken his tunic, his beautiful silk tunic, and dipped it into the lamb's blood and said to their father, hey, Joseph is dead. Had they told the truth and said, you know, Dad, we made a mistake. We sold him to slave traders.
He most probably is in Egypt. Then Jacob, who was a wealthy man, would have gone down to Egypt and brought back his son. We made a mistake. We made a horrific mistake. Let's go rescue our brother. No. Listen carefully. They took his silk tunic, his multicolored coat made out of beautiful silk. They dipped it into the lamb's blood. And they said to their father, Joseph is dead. And remember, we discussed the trauma. It didn't matter that Joseph went through therapy with himself and dealt with what was done to him and came out to be the Joseph he was as we analyzed him. His brothers, did they repent? And we found that they did. But the trauma of what they did remained. Moshe knew that. Moshe said we cannot leave Egypt until we reconcile what happened to our people and why we ended up in Egypt. There has to be now a family therapy session. We have to have a family therapy session. Now we're going to dip the blood again in goat, take from the goat blood, but we're not going to do it to harm Yosef. Now we're going to take the blood and put it on the doorposts to save our lives. The reenactment for positive, the reference to the same thing that happened to Joseph, but now we are working it out. Taking all our childhood trauma, bringing it out into open and saying, this is what we did to Joseph. We dipped his tunic in the lamb's blood. Now we're going to take that blood out of the lamb and we're going to put it on our doorposts. And now, the question you ever noticed by the Seder, every question is asked. But we say, on every night we dip twice. We never dip. But on Pesach we dip twice, but it never says why we dip. Why do we dip? Karpas, vegetable and salt water, and then maror and charaisis. Because what's another name for karpas? Anybody know? Silk, fine fabric. We're dipping Yosef's coat, metaphorically speaking, in the salt water. His cries, he cried. They took his tunic, they dipped it in blood, and he cried and he begged. He said, don't kill me, please, don't sell me. You know, later on, remember we discussed a few weeks ago how in the parsha, Yosef is silent. Later on, in prison, the brothers reveal what he said. They said, and Yosef cried, and we let him be sold. They revealed what actually happened later on. We know what happened. Otherwise, we don't know what happened. Yosef doesn't say anything in the whole story. So when we dip, we're dipping to repent and say we did the wrong thing. We dipped his coat, now the salt water. And then you dip the maror, the bitterness, and you make it sweet. You confront what you did. You confront your trauma and bring it out into the open. That's the dipping. That's why we dip twice. This is what Moshe said to the Jewish people, and that's why they weren't allowed to leave. Why weren't they allowed to leave? I'm finished. I'm done. I don't want to hear any more of your complaints, how my matzah balls were not floaters, they were sinkers. And I don't want to hear any more that my matzah bride didn't taste like Bubby Sadie's. No, I'm leaving early. Enough is enough, Zayda. Stop telling me that I should be a better Jew. Stop rushing, stop giving. They had to stay together. God is telling Moshe to tell the Jewish people, confront, argue, fight, bring out the pain, criticize each other, but stay together. You're not leaving the house till you confront your issues. They have to stay in one house together. One house together till the morning. And let me read you the pasuk because it's so beautiful. Okay, here. And that's why he says, take a bunch of hyssop and dip it in the blood. What's hyssop? It's soap. It's soap. It's soap. A second. You know, remember I told you I have so many notes, it's ridiculous. As I read something, I write it because I'm like, this is amazing. This is amazing. Let me find it. Hold on a second. I have to find where I scribbled it. Give me 2 seconds because I want to read this to you because it's so powerful. Hopefully I could find it before I make you. Oh, here. V'lakachta agudas Esav. Take, it means take the land, but it really means v'lakachta agudas. Take the group, Esav, soap, and cleanse the group. Cleanse means, group therapy. So if you analyze the wording that God tells Moshe to do, v'lakachta agudas Esav, why use those words? You could use many other words. Because Esav means hyssop, a soap. Take your group and cleanse the group. Go to therapy. Discuss, argue, fight. That's what you have to do. Exile causes 2 consequences people don't realize. It causes the world to hate us, anti-Semitism, everyone hates us. And also what happens, Jews begin hating Jews. We alienate each other. Right? All those Hasidics, they're ruining it for us. No wonder everyone hates us. Look what they look like. They look like they came out of the shtetl. They have 11 kids. They eat certain food. They wear the black hat. Shanda. Jews hate each other. That's the consequences of exile. The result, the remedy is put everyone in a room, fight it out, God says. You're going to stay together in that room till the morning. Use cleanse, soap, work it out, because that will be the remedy to exile. That will bring the redemption when we unite as one. And now the Jews can leave Mitzrayim because we brought to forth what we did and why we ended up here. We can't ignore how we ended up in Egypt as slaves. How did it happen to us? We were settled very nicely in Israel. Meredith, share. I love when you share.
No, it's just what you said. This morning when my daughter, it's 7 hours ahead, and she said, "Oh, we've had such a hard day," because they thought the hostages were coming out and then they weren't. And I realized, I was like, "Who's the we?" And she meant we, because even though she's there for a short time, she feels we, the people in this country, we, the people of Israel. It's exactly what you said. And that's not, we're here in the diaspora, in the exile, but the we. So I thought about it all morning, and it's exactly what you just said. So thank you for articulating it that way.
I wanted to tell you something. That's beautiful, Meredith. It's true. We talk about it, our brothers and sisters. We have to own our family, our people, not they, the Israel, like the Israelis, people like to say, the Israelis. I'm like, the Israelis? You mean my family? That's how we have to look at that. Very beautiful. Thank you, Meredith. So now, interesting enough, I want to bring another point. How did the blood libels start? You ever wondered? And why they started? Because this all started from here. Again, the Jews, the brothers of Joseph used the blood, to deceive their father. They said Joseph was killed. That never goes away. You can make peace with everything. And we know the brothers repented, and Joseph knew, and they cried. But it's still there in some way, what they did to him. The horrific act they did. What they did to their father. So the blood, Pesach comes up. It comes up. The story of blood comes up always Pesach. Why? So there were different theories I read about blood libels. Why did the Jew haters always attack the Jews with blood libels Pesach time? Why? Because they used to say that the ice melted and all the dead bodies that they killed came up. So they blamed the Jews. That was just one thing I read. But you have to say that the blood libels is not just, why did they think of other libels? Because there's a remnant of that we did to our brother Joseph. It's there. It doesn't go away. And that when that negative energy is produced in the universe, it affects us. Never say, it's a story from then. No. Every story impacts us in ways that we don't even know. So the blood libels started in England in the 12th century. Was the first blood libel. I did a little homework here. And then you had Mendel Baylis in 1911 in Kiev. Took 2 years, he was exonerated. They said he killed a Christian boy for blood, for the matzah. That's why the Taz, one of the Talmudic sages, said, though the custom is to use red wine on Pesach, red wine, because of the Nile, turned to blood and the plagues and all the miracles, he told his disciples to use white wine, because the non-Jews would come in and say, oh yeah, the red, that's blood. The Jews are drinking the 4 cups of blood. So he tried to avert the gossip, and the pogroms say, use white wine, use white wine. So the toxicity from that original dip of Yosef's tunic stays and resurfaces. It resurfaces. Remember the story of the miracle of ice? I don't know if it pertains today. Should I say it? I don't know if it matches up with the story. Let me tell the story of the Zvila Rebbe. That's a nicer story. And maybe the story of the miracle of ice. So the Zvila Rebbe in the 1920s, he was banished into Siberia. For 7 years, he was punished for being what? For being a Rebbe, for following Torah mitzvahs. And 7 years later, he's called into the warden's office together with an elderly Jew. Now, the Zvila Rebbe was a very religious, pious Jew. This other elderly Jew was not exactly a religious Jew. He was not a traditional Jew. And the warden said, good news, fellows, you're being released today from Siberia. You can go home. Wow, they never thought they would leave. He says, sign on the paper and you're ready to go. The Zvila Rebbe is thinking to himself, how could I sign? It's Shabbos. If I sign, I'll be desecrating Shabbos. But on the other hand, I'm allowed to sign, because every day in Siberia is a death sentence. The cold, the hunger, the illnesses, the plagues going around. It's a death sentence. It's Pekuach Nefesh. Pekuach Nefesh, you're allowed to desecrate Shabbos. But then his other mind says, no, I can't desecrate. I haven't desecrated Shabbos till no, I'm not. He looks at the warden straight in the eye, says, I can't sign, warden, because it's my Shabbos. I can't write on Shabbos. The warden looks, are you crazy? He says, you'll never get out. If you don't sign now and I release you today, you'll die here. The Rebbe said himself. The other elderly Jew, he says, okay, you're not such a fool, sign. This secular Jew, I don't like to use titles, but this secular Jew says to the warden, you know what, I'm thinking now I can't sign either. It's Shabbos. So the Zvila Rebbe says to the warden, give me the pen. I'm going to sign for this man. This fellow can't stay in Siberia another day. He's an old man. Every day is going to be another. He won't survive another day. Me, I'm a stronger person. Give me the pen. I'll sign for him. I want to save another Jew. I'm going to sign, he says to himself. The warden looks at him and the other Jew. He says, you know what? I'm going to sign for both of you. He was so touched. Even a cruel warden was so touched. He signed, and they both were released from prison. Why this story came to mind when I was studying this is because it shows what God is asking of us. There was infighting among the Jewish people. Did a terrible thing to your brother years ago. Now you got to stick it out together. Whatever it takes, you got to be united as one. That's going to be the redemption. That's going to be redemption. Thank you, Meredith. Good Shabbos to you. And I think this will close on this note, that we have to focus on Jewish unity. Jews love to fight. Jews love to argue. That's our modus apparatus. Meet a Jew. What do you say to them? Shalom Aleichem. What do they say back to you? Aleichem HaShalom. Opposite. Why not? You say Shalom Aleichem, they say Shalom Aleichem. No, we always have to be contrary. Shalom Aleichem, Aleichem HaShalom. Imagine I come over to you and go, how are you? You are how? Goodbye, bye, good. We're always contrary. We always have to say the opposite. Wasn't that kishka delicious? That was delicious. That's kishka. You don't know what kishka is, Irving. You don't know what kishka is. You'll never know what kishka is. We love to argue. Comes the Torah portion and says, argue, fight it out, punch it out. But at the end of the day, Am Yisrael, Chai, Achdus Yisrael, one with our with each other, one with Israel, one with Torah, one with God. We're all one. Whatever
And do
you
it
look like.
behind closed doors.
Very good, behind closed doors. And then hopefully when you go out of the doors, you're also holding hands, united. So I want to wish everybody a wonderful, wonderful Shabbos
You
Good
too.
Shabbos.
Good
and
Shabbos.
a wonderful week.